Diablo 2. What happened? After the esteemed remake in 2021, Blizzard went as far as updating the game and even creating new items. But then, nothing. It's now been 2 years since the last major update. Is this game really in its final form? Or was this post just way ahead of its time? As promised, I have shared your feedback with Blizzard, and I read through every single comment so they wouldn't have to. This is the current state of Diablo 2. In Lord of Destruction, these were the most powerful builds for each class, assuming you had the best gear and your goal was to smash level 85 areas and 90 plus bosses as fast as possible. These rankings might not come as a surprise to legacy players of the game, but what might surprise you is how they've changed in recent history. Let's start by examining this class in particular. The Paladin has seen some interesting changes in Diablo 2 Resurrected. While there are a ton of variants to this class, the Hammerden remains the best build for pushing Terror Zones. Terror Zones, or TZs, were a new addition to the game in D2R. Whether you're completing a Holy Grail list or leveling to 99, Terror Zones are the way. This alone marks a pretty significant change, but the TLDR, these are a pretty commonly accepted positive change in recent history. Anyhow, back to the Hammerden. This build has dropped in ranking for D2R, but the funny thing is, nothing has changed about it. It's still the same old HDIN it's always been since the good old days of LOD. There is another Paladin variant that makes the game fun on lower player counts, and that is the FOH DIN. The cooldown for FOH was shortened significantly, and the Holy Bolts it releases also got some buffs. They now do damage to demons and undead monsters and absolutely wreck certain areas of the game. Auradins got buffed as well in D2R. They're probably the king of lazy play and P1 difficulty, but no changes to this class have really rocked the late game meta, and that's a good thing. So why is the Hammerden at a lower rank? To get to the bottom of that question, let's examine another class. The Sorceress maintains its S tier rank in D2R, but not because it's the same build it always was. You see, a Lightning Sorc in LOD was a Chain Lightning Sorc. This was very effective in PvM because lightning immunities were easier to break on monsters than any other immunity. But still, the Lightning Sorceress got some different synergies in the new version. The Infinity Nova Sorc has become the S-tier Sorceress build for climbing the ladder. Minus enemy resist has become one of the most important things on elemental builds, and that's because of these. Sunder Charms are a new addition to D2R that remove a specific immunity for monsters at the cost of player resistance to that same element. The Sorceress was most highly buffed by the introduction of these. While the Fire Sunder certainly opens up doors for an underplayed variant, the Cold and Lightning Sunders made already S-tier Sorc builds even more S-tier. This most certainly was not their intended purpose, but these Sunder Charms are why practically any Sorceress variant is effective in a ladder climb, and why Infinity Sorcs in particular are at the top of the food chain. While the community has mostly negative opinions about Sunder Charms, some classes have benefited greatly from their existence. The Fire Druid is now the best PvM build in its class. In combination with the synergy changes to the elemental skill tree, the Sunder Charm helps this build quite a bit. But really only because fire immunity was one of the hardest immunities to break prior to this charm. Imagine if fire resistance, cold resistance, and poison resistance worked like lightning resistance. Perhaps there wouldn't even be a need for these things. As you can see, it's rare for a monster to have extremely high lightning immunity, but that's not the case for the other ones. Part of the feedback for Blizzard was to think about things like this and potentially reconsider Sunder Charms in general. But that aside, this is the best in-slot weapon for a Fire Druid. I'm not even kidding. The fact that a basic sword with 6 facets in it is the best damage output for the best in-class druid build could suggest that there's room for improvement in this item slot. But it also could suggest that this game is just fucking awesome. Itemization in Diablo 2 is unlike any other game, and items of all rarities have a place, even in endgame builds. This is really a charming element of the game that should never be overlooked. It truly makes it what it is. The Druid has had a pretty healthy progression in D2R so far. Although Werebears could probably use some buffs, Fury Druids are some of the best performing melee classes in PvP, and while their lackluster performance in PvM might tilt some players, not all skills were meant for PvM. To this day, PvP in Diablo 2 has one of the largest followings of any game of its kind. Significantly more online players have quite the appreciation for it. Plus, the last time Blizzard tried buffing skills that were already good in PvP, something pretty drastic happened. The Necromancer might still be a lower tier class in PvM, but it's insane now in PvP. One patch in D2R buffed the bone skill damage, and now we're in a bit of a predicament. While new world records have been set in speedrunning with bone skills, the skill set still remains subpar in the ladder climb. While most PvP players would prefer reverting this change, that's kinda hard to do when there's another part of the community that has set world records with it. It's hard to do at this point. But the true king of the Necro ladder climb is the Poison Necro. The Poison Sunder has also had a pretty significant impact on this build with its use of lower resistance. But truth be told, the Poison Necro always had diversified damage due to Corpse Explosion, and it's completely viable to run the build without a Sunder Charm. Poison Dagger is still very weak and should probably be one of those always hit skills, but even if it was, poison damage is very weird in this game. Llama explained it perfectly in this video, so if you want to know more about its limitations, check that one out. And while the progressive story of the Necro is a bit sad, quite possibly the saddest story of all D2 characters belongs to another class. The Barbarian has seen some pretty significant changes in D2R, but it's still the slowest class with only niche magic find uses. The best ladder climbing barb build now is the Brawler. This is because of certain skill changes and synergy bonuses added in recent D2R patches. The buffs to double throw and some other skills have been very nice, but this class still suffers from one major flaw that's held it back for years. In PvP, barbs are pigeonholed into using the Beast rune word so they can meet their IAS breakpoints with Berserker axes, which have the best one-handed range. Even PvM brawler barbs rely on their merc having a faith bow to hit the proper breakpoints. The playthrough is also pretty bad because of attack speed. Some streamers have practically broken into man-baby tears live because of it. I am now doubling down on what I've said in the past, that the throw barb attack frames need to be 500% faster. You can watch all 30 hours of that in a little playlist here if you'd like. But could it hurt to add increased attack speed to the increased speed skill? Most people wouldn't think so. And is that it? What else am I forgetting for outstanding ladder climbing builds? The Assassin has made the most violent move up the charts and is now the strongest class in the Diablo universe, probably the PoE universe too. How could we even talk about this build without mentioning this? Thanks to the introduction of the Mosaic rune word, its namesake build is practically the only class you can choose now if you want to be on the first page of a ladder race. And while there is a lot of commotion about this rune word in the community, the sentiment surrounding it is pretty divided. Some players love it and finally enjoy playing on an MA Sin. Other players hate it and think Blizzard just keeps screwing up our game. Truth be told, Blizzard's been screwing up martial arts skills for years. Even since LOD, these things have been way overclocked on their damage, but Mosaic dragged that problem directly in front of all of our faces. Zarfen the Loot Goblin used MA skills to one-shot every monster in the game on a playthrough.
Oh, no way! We did it! We one-shot the entire game.
And that's without Mosaic. So the rune word itself might not necessarily be the problem. There's been a lot of suggestions about how to fix Mosaic, reduce the chance to not consume, limit the charges, delete it. But if the damage from charge up skills could get cut by about 50%, that'd be a pretty good start. It would still be quite a force in PvM, but that's okay. Some builds always have been. The Amazon is in a pretty healthy spot. It's an S-tier build in both PvP and PvM, and nothing's really extremely broken with it. Except this. In a recent patch, Impale might have been a bit overclocked. Not because of the always hit mechanic that was added, but more because of this one. Slow's target might not be working as intended. While slow is capped at 50% technically, it's only capped at 50% per source. This is probably a glitch, but let's see what it looks like. Let's say a player gets hit by a clay golem, which applies 50% slow. Then he gets hit by a player using 50% slow on his items. He's noticeably slower. But in case that wasn't slow enough, here's what happens if you get cracked by an Impale after having all of that slow. It's really bad. Additionally, the dodge, avoid, and evade animations getting skipped is now a bit OP. What happened to the days of don't teleport into souls and get good? So this is the current tier list made up of all the top builds from each class. To put it in comparison, and using thousands of duels worth of data, this is how these builds stack up in the current PvP meta. I say current meta like it changes constantly, but D2 ain't that kind of game. Some things are just better when the underlying premise doesn't change drastically over time. Like simulation games. Games in this genre are so much more fun when you do things you shouldn't.
I have a girlfriend, lady! I have a fucking girlfriend, lady! Sorry, that chick hit on me.
It's like the devs of these games realize that players want to do things their own way, even if that means living on the edge.
Hi, Carol! Would you like some weed?
With G2A, or Gate to Adventure, you can dive deep into simulation games and many other genres for a massive discount. I bookmark this site and always check it before trying new titles. They also have an app, so you can have all of these deals perpetually at your fingertips. Try it out with my link below and let me know the wildest simulation games that you can find. Nearly 1 year ago, you all made your voices heard in the comments section of this video. It's never been more clear that Diablo 2 truly does mean something different to everyone, and that's why it's such a hard game to change. For every person who hates Mosaic, there's another that loves it. There's still people who think Enigma ruined the game, despite others thinking teleport should be on more items. While there's many things about which the community disagrees, there seem to be some things that we all can agree on. So if Blizzard ever does update this game again, what would it look like? Here's what you all had to say. To many of us, D2 was the original loot game, but if you're jamming on higher player counts and trying to see all the items on the ground, it can be difficult. The community is almost unanimously in support of adding something that helps with this. It doesn't have to be as complicated as loot filters in other games. Simply adding a feature you can turn on or off to hide the following items could be extremely helpful, as these are the ones that often clutter screens. Adding some sort of currency tab has massive support in the community, but it might be harder than most people think. Project Diablo 2 is a mod for the original version of the game, and the currency tab in this game looks great in its most recent season. Even the one in Path of Exile 2 is very well done. But in order to make something like this work in D2R, I think a lot would have to change in the background. Regardless, this suggestion along with the previous one is hard to mess up, and practically anything is better than nothing for most players. This, in combination with access to more stash tabs and character slots, is something that many players have said they would even pay for. This just seems like a layup for D2 to catch some perpetual monetization, which could help pay for further updates to the game. Ethereal items are a big deal in D2. Many players only pick up rares and uniques just to see if they spawned as ethereal, and if they didn't, they throw them back on the ground. Guilty. When an item is ethereal, it gets a 50% bonus in base damage or defense at the cost of not being able to be repaired. But there's ways around this, and players take full advantage of that in order to get the most out of their items. But unfortunately, some items can't ever spawn ethereal. Set items, along with items that have the indestructible mod, are barred from spawning in this state. The community has resounding support for making this a thing, and it just seems like a slam dunk if Blizzard ever does release another update. Some more low-hanging fruit is this little pet peeve for Din players. In LOD, the smite animation had the shield come from over the top and felt like the Din was throwing a powerful overhand right at his target. There was a certain feeling to this that just felt good. But in D2R, he pushes outward with his shield during Smite, which kinda looks like he's parrying something. For whatever reason, when D2R launched, they decided to play the animation for Smite in reverse. So simply reversing the current animation gives you something that looks and feels like a Smite from LOD. Big Din player here, and this has admittedly tilted me since launch. For every person who understands PvP, this is a huge issue. And for the ones who don't, they truly don't care if this happens or not. But many players are in favor of changing the current state of faster hit recovery. To bring you up to speed, changes were made in patch 2.4 that protected players from awkward lockouts in PvP, but it basically just made them immune to being stunned after one hit. This has turned PvP into a hold down teleport fest with zero skill required to escape other skillful players. In LOD, there was something called weapon swap glitch that allowed players to escape lockouts by keybinding weapon swap to their mouse wheel. So one of the big suggestions now is to only make the current changes to FHR apply when a player is using force move. Whereas most players keybind force move to their mouse wheels nowadays, making it so that the current changes only apply when players are using force move would make PvP feel like it did in LOD. A huge W and simple change. Many unique and set items are rather subpar in the current meta. Giving them some love could go a long way. Ideally, we'd love to see a PTR with this, but there's one item in particular that players think is quite lackluster with regard to its rarity. Tyrael's Might is the rarest item in the game. Some players go decades without ever finding one, but oddly enough, the item is kinda trash. It's got some good abilities on it, but just pales in comparison to other options that players have. While players have pleaded for the item to have teleport for years, some of you came up with other very creative ideas. The best idea was to have Tyrael's Might grant a skill shrine effect when equipped. This would overwrite curses, essentially making the player immune to being cursed. This is in addition to the Might aura being added to the item. And the third thing, quite possibly the biggest curveball, came from our friend over at Carbot Animations, who suggested adding +1 to Town Portal on Tyrael's Might, because Tyrael opens up a lot of portals. Actually a good idea and grants you inventory space. Personally, I think either adding teleport or all of the things mentioned here to Tyrael's Might would be insanely cool. If we combine that with the other idea and make it so that this can spawn Ethereal, a perfect F Tyrael's Might would be a literal 1 in a million item to find and finally worth its rarity. Diablo 2 means something different to everyone. Recent experiments in patches and fixes with the game have given players hope that we will one day see another big update. But D2 really has mastered the concept of leaving its audience wanting more.